Let me do. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome
Hey.
to the May edition of Speaker's Corner. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Jacinta Gallant, a lawyer in PEI, who is specializing in practicing in insight mediation, insight as a method of conflict resolution, and has a very cool product to tell us about that. You know, the goal really is to help to resolve conflict when families move into two homes. So great to see all of you. I will keep admitting people into the room. There's a big crowd here. So I'll send it, without further ado, I'll send it over to you, Jacinta, and looking forward to a wonderful conversation and learning from you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm gonna do this. Let me just see. Here we are. Bring you guys back forward. So hello, please know that I am thrilled actually to be invited to talk to a group of mediators that have chosen to be a part of an organization that takes it so seriously. The work that OAFM has been doing to try and bring families to the forefront of dispute resolution is really admirable. And so while I am a lawyer and a mediator and a collaborative lawyer, and I live in PEI, sorry, it's almost like we've sat out the COVID war. And so we really have had so much more freedom than all of you. I want you to know that I really appreciate and respect that many of you have been struggling with, you know, keeping connections with your own loved ones for the last year, let alone the work that we're also doing to help families whose stress and conflict seems to be worse this year than I've ever seen it. And so please know that I'm honored to be invited here, and that I would very much enjoy your questions, your chat, your unmuting and offering an observation if you want. But I do have a bit of a show to put on the road, because I want to show you, I want to tell you a bit about the story of my journey to insight, but also to creating resources that would help our clients. And then also share with you what they are. I want to make sure that you can see them. And then I want to invite you at the end of this webinar to get in touch if you want to become part of our international worldwide community. So it's a little bit of an information piece. It's a bit of a pitch, but it's very much about you and the struggles that we face as collaborative professionals, as mediators who are also collaborative professionals, to really delivering on the promise of what we want to bring. Just a sec. So I'm going to share my screen, and I invite you all to chat or participate as you wish. Okay, so by the way, my new company is called Innovation for Lawyers. And one of the things that I like to talk about is that I see innovation by lawyers to be the mere fact that we now look to other professionals to do some of the work. Right? So the whole idea that lawyers recognize other disciplines, whether it's through collaborative practice or mediation, parenting coordination, other forms of dispute resolution, to me, that's a huge step forward for lawyers. So 2 years ago, I decided to create a company that would support lawyers to do more of that good work. One of the things that you might like to think about right now is the things that you love working as a mediator, working as a collaborative professional, working as a family dispute resolution professional. And identifying for yourself in the chat box, or, you know, I can certainly come up with some examples, the challenges that our clients are facing. They're facing a life ahead that's not what they thought it's kind of not what they signed up for. They're often having to participate in a process, Gail, participate in a process they didn't choose, let alone choose something that might require more of them than they might want to give. And so we deal with fear, avoidance, grief, loss, terror, worry about money, about kids, about my identity, about who I am, about who I thought I was, who I thought we were. So we have all these challenges coming to us, and we know that there's a legal dimension, an emotional, psychological, social dimension, and a financial dimension. And so when we think about what we're offering as dispute resolution professionals, we're offering our services in a way that will be humane, that will invite them to consider who they are and who they can be in a newly formed relationship with their ex-spouse and with their children. So with all the things that we're offering care, sensitivity, intelligence, wisdom, experience, expertise. Those of us that come from a mental health background are bringing that knowledge of family dynamics, about what children need, about conflict and communication. Those of us who have studied to be mediators have learned about conflict and how to help people communicate more effectively to resolve it. And so when we think about it, what gets in the way when we are valiantly working towards agreement? You can share in the chat box. What are the things that get in the way? I have some answers that I came up with. Fear, anger, trust. Oh yeah, trust. Lack of, broken trust, ego. Yeah, and not just the parties, right? Sometimes the ego of the professionals can get in the way of how we can past harms. Yeah, you've got trauma, you've got assumptions and judgments, you've got behaviors that are difficult to manage. And so mediators, we put ourselves in the middle of that. And on our best day, we help clients communicate more effectively so they can make good decisions. So have you ever experienced this? Have you ever experienced the client resistance to the help we're trying to give? Yeah. So no matter what our role is, certainly lawyers, we have a rep, we have a bad rep. So there's a lot of resistance sometimes to the work that we want to do with clients. But I believe as mediators, those of you who are mediators who are not lawyers, by the way, I always acknowledge that lawyers seem to be the only profession that refer to non-lawyers. It's not like non-nurse or non-doctor or non-bus driver, but we use that term. So when I do that here, I do it with a bit of a chuckle. But the whole fact is we get client resistance, and sometimes it's based on their own experience, their fear, their trauma, their grief, their loss, their worry. And yet what brought me to really go to that aha moment around curiosity and insight was to begin to notice that the resisting behaviors could be described in this way. They avoid, they demand, they complain, this is too expensive. I don't need therapy. I just want this over. I couldn't possibly do that. I don't trust her. There's no way I can participate the way you're describing it. I can't do it, and I won't. So we get resisting behaviors, and we don't always get resisting behaviors, because I know everyone that's on this call can think of those moments where we've had clients that say, thanks, I really feel supported. And I know that as hard as this is going to be, you're going to be there with me. So one of the challenges we have in our role as experts, no matter what our discipline is that we tend to meet resistance with information. We might educate the clients about a process. We might make sure they understand that the team or that I will be there to support you. We might want to call out some credentials and say, I'm a highly trained professional. We might want to really advocate for this process because it's best for your family. And so sometimes clients need information. Sometimes clients need reassurance. Sometimes clients need to know that you know what you're doing. And this is always the challenge when you're a new mediator, because you don't, you're kind of faking it till you make it. But nonetheless, we all know that strong and good intention coupled with some training can also be the greatest thing to help a family through a difficult time. It's just that when we're meeting resistance and we give more information, we're typically going to get more resistance. And so I began to study this a few years ago. 10 years ago, started with an experiment in curiosity. 5 years ago, Cheryl Picard left Carleton University, came home to PEI to retire. Of course, her sister said, you should meet my sister. So Cheryl and I met, and I was lucky enough, lucky that I submitted to about a 2-year mentorship where she kicked my ass. And I really got to know how my notions of how things should go, or what even the conflict is that we're talking about when we're talking about family conflict and the way we choose to intervene, was really stuck in the way that many of us were originally trained, in the interest-based process, which is a great process when people are ready to negotiate and to look at what matters and create their inventory of interests to make good decisions. But what doesn't actually address the difficult times in those moments of conflict and argument. And so a real alarm bell went off for me a few years ago when I began to notice, because I was getting more curious about clients' resistance based on my learning about insight, which is all about conflict being a defensive response, that I started noticing how often clients told me emphatically they did not want to get lawyers involved in their cases. And I was a lawyer, so I was like, FYI, but they put me in a different box. And so I had to get curious about what's that resistance about. So those of you who are on this call who are also lawyers know that this is probably something that you hear. And those of you who are non-lawyers, you probably hear this a lot. And so I began to think, I want to do something with everything that I'm learning. And I want to have more fun at work because my daughter decided to go to law school. So I'm like, okay, I want her to see the fun side of practicing law. I wanted her to, if she chose to work with me, and she did, I wanted her to see how you could have a happy, balanced life, helping families and also being a lawyer. I wanted more meaningful engagement with my clients, and not at a time when they were resisting that help, sometimes because of where they're at, sometimes because they're worried about the billable hour. I wanted to figure out a way here. I was very involved with our collaborative practice group, and I was noticing resistance to a full team. So I began to think I wanted to do better teamwork, whether that was in mediation, collaborative mediation, or collaborative practice. I wanted to be a better business person because I was getting a bit worried about, as my hourly rate went up, how some of that work that I wanted to do with clients didn't really make sense in the way I was doing it, which was very in the moment, in the room with me. And I won't say in an ego way all about me, but in some ways, it was that the magic will happen when I'm present. So what I did was I asked my favorite clients, what'd you think? What do you want? What could have been better? What did you like about the way we worked together in any process, by the way? Mind you, I wasn't litigating anymore, so it wasn't litigation. How could I have helped you be more prepared? And they told me. So I asked my favorite clients because I wanted more of them. And they told me they really valued the time that we spent together, human to human, those moments of pain and joy and laughter and sadness. That was about being a human being going through a difficult time. And they also thought they could have been better prepared at almost every stage of their work with me. And so I let go of outcome. I took the time in 2017, this frustration was building. And in 2018, I took Tuesdays to study insight. I'd often go out to Cheryl's place and we'd like chew on the latest thing. I took Fridays to create a product that I want to share with you. And I wanted to pay attention to how people in the public are perceiving lawyers, because I happen to be a lawyer and I'm tired of saying, I'm a lawyer, but I'm nice, or I'm a lawyer, but I'm normal, or I'm a lawyer, but I care. And so for those of you who are on the call who are also lawyers, sorry for that, know that you know what I mean. And those of you who aren't, you're probably fully aware of the public perception of lawyers. And so this was the outcome. I'm going to show you a video. Hopefully it'll play well. Oops. Oh, it won't.
How can I help? Eva, if you stop share and then before you hit share screen, you have to hit the two bottom buttons, optimize for sound and audio. I'm sorry, and video.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I never had to do that before. Let's try.
Okay.
Now forget it. I'll just play you the video down here.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
I know what I'll do. I'll just go on the internet, the old internet.
Yeah.
Oops.
The old internet for sure. So this is on YouTube.
Thanks for your patience. Yeah.
Okay.
We had this slide worked last week, but it must be Ontario. I don't know.
It must be Ontario. Yeah, we're causing troubles. Yeah. I type the exact same way that you do.
All right, here's the video, baby. Okay, so it's
All
3.5 minutes, but it will tell a story. Couples going through a separation are facing emotional, practical, financial and legal challenges. And as a divorce lawyer, I wanted to help them be more prepared for their meetings with me. Clients often resist us when we want to get into the conversation about what's underneath the fear or the demand or the worry.
Our Family in Two Homes is a tool that grounds both clients and professionals in the process so they have a common language in their work together. Law school doesn't teach you how to manage conflict or how to manage emotions or how to help someone develop a better future for themselves.
As a collaborative divorce lawyer, I was highly motivated to be happier at work. And so when I created these resources, I was firstly only ever using them with my clients. And I noticed that they were happier too. They were more prepared for their meetings with me. They valued the deeper dialogue that we were able to get into because they'd been prepared. Our colleagues around the world who are now using the resources, they report the same thing.
I've had clients tell me that the workbooks have made their fights less personal. It's not you're wrong or I'm right, but we're different. And once they understand their differences, they're able to work to come up with a plan for their future that's going to work for both of them and for their family. When you become a licensee, you join a network of like-minded professionals all around the world who are constantly sharing their experiences and bouncing ideas off one another. And it's really nice to have that connection with people who are like you and who want to help families.
I think the reason the workbook has such an impact on the client is that they can do it on their own time, and it engages their sense of self-discovery, which is actually, it's often lost when people are stressed and anxious and worried. And so it invites clients to consider who they are so that the professionals who are helping them can identify those challenges, those obstacles in the way, and help the couple then, in their pattern, make decisions together and reach agreement. Our Family in Two Homes is for parents who are raising children still. Our Family in a Few Homes helps couples who are separating when their children are now adults. Over time, we saw the success of the workbooks that were helping clients prepare for dialogue and not debate. And then we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had a workbook for people who want to stay together?
Designing Our Future Together is our newest workbook that focuses on families coming together, whether that involves people getting married, moving in together, or people who've been together for a long time and need a relationship refresh. I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people. And now, as a lawyer, I want my clients to feel better leaving my office than they did coming in.
It's time to innovate. It's time for a refresh. And the colleagues who are joining the Two Homes professional community are all innovators in their communities. Let us help you stand out as an innovative professional in your community. So gang, I mean, it all started as a lawyer who just wanted to have more fun at work. And those of you who are friends of mine probably know that I tend to be more highly motivated to do things if there's a little bit of fun involved. But I gotta tell you, I couldn't believe the change. So I gotta tell you a funny story. First, I thought no client will ever go into mediation or collaborative practice in Prince Edward Island without the kind of preparation that I want them to have. So I created the first version of the workbook to be for like workshops. So we spread the news all over Prince Edward Island. Prepare for your process, whatever it was. And they were gonna have 2 3-hour sessions. I was gonna facilitate it without the requirement for personal sharing. They were going to get a workbook. We were going to work through the stuff, conflict, communication style, trust, values, all of that. And then they were going to go, I didn't care if I didn't even keep them as clients. I wanted so much more for clients to experience whatever process they're in a more positive way. Everyone who was not going through a separation thought it was a fabulous idea. And there wasn't a single person who was going through a separation who wanted it. So like out of a huge failure, like 100% fail, not a single inquiry. Nobody wanted the workshop, folks. And actually Sheila Brown in Toronto said to me, we kind of tried that too and nobody wants the workshop. And I thought, oh, this will be different. So it was true. So we regrouped because I'd spent all the time and money on design and really the first workbook was intended only for me and my clients and these workshops. So when we created the workbook, I fleshed it out more with a little bit more of do-it-yourself instructions. So it wasn't all about the show in the room. and started using it with my own clients. We did a marketing campaign in January 20, doesn't matter, does it, 19? And in that marketing campaign, people like you, who were friends of mine around the world on social media, said, oh my God, that's fabulous. You know, people will say, I always thought we should do this, or I meant to do that, or I did do that, or whatever. But most people are saying, oh my God, this really works. So that was the first indication at all that I was going to create an international export company in my spare time. But alas, I have. So it started with me trying to recruit lawyers to begin to work in a different way with clients. And we've created, I'll call it the lawyer version of the workbook, in 32 different legal jurisdictions in 8 countries. And I think we've got 4 languages now. So, but we started with all the Canadian provinces and a few states and Australia. So the test showed us that clients in other people's offices were responding in that same positive way that I saw. They show up, they're just more ready. They're ready for a conversation. Even the people who were more buttoned up were ready. They were more prepared for the kind of dialogue that I guess, wanted to facilitate for them to be able to make good decisions. So I want to show you the work, but I did want to tell you the funny story of the fail, because I never set out to do this, but it's turned out to be one of the most rewarding things that I ever dreamed of. So I'm going to share the screen again. Just a sec. I'm going to show you the workbooks first. So I'm going to quickly go through the workbooks, and then I'm going to come back to show you how they work. But let's just start with this. So as an example, yeah, forget that, cancel. Here's the Our Family in 2 Homes workbook. I'm going to show you the version that has been created, because initially the rollout was with my decision to try, and I figured if we could help lawyers do better work, they would bring in mediators, they would bring in interdisciplinary collaborative teams, and that would help families. But what we found was most of the collaborative professionals and mediators who see the workbook say, hey, let's, what about us? And so in many ways, it was the natural next thing. So the workbook starts with reflection. You'll see, if you've studied Insight already, the Insight approach to conflict, that a lot of the way the questions are framed are curious, elicitive questions. But I say to the clients, do the first 13 pages on your own time. It's treated like your private journal you do not need to share. So it asks things like, what am I most concerned about as I begin this process? That's a valuing question. How do I hope I'll feel about all this in 2 years? Why is it important that we work things out without court? And then we get into, well, what are some of the obstacles that sometimes get in the way? Or what do I worry will get in the way of a healthy communication as we approach decisions about separation? Or asking about threats. When we have difficult things to talk about, I sometimes feel threatened or worried about this. And I think my former partner might feel threatened or worried about that. Trust, I'm going to show you a video, if I can make it work, about breaking trust down into workable parts, so that clients are directed to consider which parts have broken down and which parts do you hope to restore. This page is powerful in those moments of I don't trust you arguments. The values exercise I'll show you on the video. It's getting at core values, but also how you make decisions. So we may see couples who are conflicted over their very values might be so different that they can clash just because of their differences. Often their core values might be similar enough that that's not the case, but they don't make decisions in the same way. Or they're easily making decisions about parenting, but not so much about money, or vice versa. Looking at conflict style, looking at even, do you think while you speak, like me, or are you someone who processes quietly before you put it out there? So a lot of people will say that they've learned something about themselves and it particularly resonated for them on conflict style and how they show up in a conversation. Then we look at what are your preferred methods of communication when there's conflict? What about when things are easy? Do you struggle with giving and receiving feedback? Here's some tips. Pulling it all together so that you've got who you are, and at the stage of the mediation where your partner has revealed their core values, you can fill in the blanks there as well. But even just when we disagree, as we move through this process, here are some things I'm going to keep in mind. So you're doing this privately. And I'll show you in a bit what we do in working with the client with the workbook. So then we talk about parenting plan. And for each jurisdiction where the law is explained very specifically for Ontario as an example, and in the neutral version, because we know that mediators who are working as neutrals without bothering to go to law school because they chose something better or different, you have to have these conversations with clients. So we mention the law, of course, here are some of the legal terms you might see, and invite the clients to ensure that they consult with a collaborative lawyer. So if you're already in a collaborative mediation, the team's already set up. And if you're not, you're very clear that you're here to help the clients reach agreement, and the part that goes beyond legal information, you'll help them facilitate some kind of legal advice piece, which is a whole other challenge for us, I know, but just to know that that's why the neutral version speaks specifically of collaborative lawyers. If you were in a community where there weren't any, well, that's different. But the questions about parenting are all questions that good parenting mediators would find helpful and inviting. And none of these questions replace the work that we do, because they just get people to think about holidays, special events, working out changes, how much notice, are weekends important? What about vacations? Is scheduling a challenge because you're a shift worker? If so, there's a grid on page 38 that can help. And so again, even reflecting on your own parenting style, how you see the other parent as their parenting style, and look at this page 19, all this long list of where would you like to see consistency in two homes? And so that there are so many times I've had clients say, that was such a helpful list because I never really thought about it. And for those of you who are worried that it will lead the more vigilant parents who want consistency and control everywhere, my experience is that the list normalizes the conversation about where there might be one parent that needs more information or detail or commitments than the other parent who's just saying, trust me, you know the kids will be fine. And so I find that this normalizes that so that it just becomes a regular part of the conversation and less an argument about you're too uptight or you're too loose. And then reflecting on how you want to make decisions, even respecting each individual to say, you want to make them jointly, separately, I decide, you decide. Clearly, in most of our cases, it's going to be joint decision making, but even posing the question leaves the clients in the driver's seat and opens up a dialogue where they differ. So then we get into money, 3 more pages, which has reflection on money personality, returning to the values card sort exercise, looking at decision making and looking at core values, because sometimes this might not show up in the parenting decision making and suddenly it's clear that there's a decision making approach and a core value approach that's clashing in money. And then asking questions like, where do you see as similar and different attitudes or beliefs about spending, so that they're able to think about those discussions we'll have about the 6-year-old getting the $500 pair of hockey skates or going to the thrift store and getting a secondhand pair, so that there's a normalization of the difference. And I've found with clients that their eyes are really wide open when they've done those reflection pages, because they see themselves. Not everything. There's not everything in the workbook that's going to be resonating with each client. Some cases, values don't even show up. Some couples are still trusting one another despite everything that's going on. But what resonates for them, we draw out through open, curious questioning. So child support's dealt with in terms of, don't forget to think about all these things. If you have legal questions, talk to a collaborative lawyer. And if you're a financial person already, you've likely got more information. The whole point of the workbook is that it's one place the clients can go back to that describes things in accessible ways and also asks curious questions that will get them to reflect on who they are, how they show up, what they want for their future, and even looking at practical things like how will you pay and what will you do when there's changes. Talking about spousal support and family property to say that it can be difficult and will help you, but here's generally speaking what the approach is, and maybe even asking you, is there anything you want to talk about now that will give you some indication about estate planning? And if so, would you like some help with that? So the workbook really respectfully asks the clients, what do they need our help with, so that we can get to their pain points early. So the version, that's the 2 homes. The version for adult people with adult children. I don't know if you've all had a look at Carol Hughes and Bruce Fredenberg's book. I'm trying to find it. Home Will Never Be the Same. There's a real focus right now on the gray divorce. And the whole idea here is that we want people who are going through their separation with adult children to reflect on the relationships that they hope to preserve and sustain in the future. And that might not be the relationship with their spouse, or it might be, but it invites them to think about who those people might be. And then it's laid out in a very similar way: communication, values, trust, conflict style, ways of expression, methods of communication. And then we get right into the money piece because there's no parenting decisions to be made. And then we talk about adult children, including post-secondary, because they might have young adults, including dependent children who are adults, including special needs, tax deductions, and other things. And so it's very much the same approach. And we're finding that oh my God, you're still here. I couldn't find you for a minute. So we're finding that the people with the adult children are more motivated than we thought. My first case using Our Family in a Few Homes was back in the early months when I was doing this just with our practice. We printed our own. We had the scale, the little binding thing. We just ripped out the pages about parenting, and our clients used the workbooks just like that because they cared about how they did this. That's why they were choosing mediation. And so we created the workbook that's very much now just for them. So yeah, so this was the first, Our Family in Two Homes, and Our Family in a Few Homes, as you've seen. And this is the one I'm most excited about right now, but I'm not going to take the time to go through it in great detail unless we have time at the end. But the workbook called Designing Our Future Together is intended to speak to those couples who are starting out together, whether it's later in life or early in life. And it's got the same reflection questions. It's got the same, let me say, content, but pitched towards a positive future focus. And we've had consultations with people who are, they need a prenup or they need a cohabitation agreement, and someone told them they better get it. And if you do a lot of work, if you look online, a lot of the messaging around prenups is all about lawyers saying, protect yourself, right? It's really, really negative. So we wanted a positive vibe. And the fun, I mean, honestly, the other young woman in the video, Taylor Smiley, that she's my daughter that's now the lawyer here. So, but she just had her first cohabitation agreement case. And we got the client who was being told she better get it because her grandfather gave her the house and he doesn't want it to be shared with him. And the partner in the case was feeling that no one trusted him. And so when Taylor met with the client and showed her the workbook, she left with 2 workbooks and came back smiling. So it normalized for the partner, and we weren't mediators in this case, we're the lawyers, but I never thought of it working so well. We just sent both workbooks. We didn't care because we just launched this in the last 6 weeks. So if you're a financial planner and a mediator, you might find that you're doing work with couples all the time who are making a financial plan, who may also need a legal agreement drafted. Well, that workbook would help them decide if they need that. It doesn't tell them what to do. It invites them to consider all the things they might want to think about. And then with very clear language, you know your future, you will decide. And if you want our help, let us help you. So there's something about the tone of I put so much effort into the tone and the elicitive nature of the questions based on my study of insight and curiosity, that it does tap into our inherent human desire for self-discovery, which is often closed and narrow and shut down when we're first meeting our clients. And so what I do in a normal rollout of a case, let me just see, is we ask, So we ask 4 questions. I'm just going to flip forward to that. Okay, so the first instructions are really, so these days, pre-screening, screening, none of that changes with the workbooks for mediation. But once I know the clients are in mediation, I want the workbooks in their hands before I have an extensive planning meeting. So I say, please complete the first 13 pages. This is your private journal. You don't need to share it with anyone. And then they go through those first 13 pages, which contain a lot of the reflection. And then in my meeting with the client, we'll go through a series of questions, including all the normal stuff that you do already. But I want 4 focused pieces to deal with the workbook. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your pattern with Jane? What concerns do you have as we approach a joint session or whatever's coming up? And how can I help? And what I find is that the answer to how can I help is so much more informed because they've had the reflection and the participation in their own self-discovery in the workbook. And so I suspect this isn't going to work either, Marianne. So I'll just stop the share for a minute so you're not bored. Any questions? So I've been talking a long time. Please feel free to.
It's wonderful. You can unmute yourselves as you wish. I've been muting people. But if you want, or use the chat to ask a question, well,
Yeah, just it'd be great to have a conversation because
Sure, yeah.
you're
lots of people here, but happy to. But these groups are usually fairly chatty. Now I've put you all on the spot, so yeah, somebody has to talk.
Or I'll show you a video.
Yeah,
it's just
whatever works. Yeah, yeah.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see that thing again. It's just I never had to do it before. It just required me to put my password in.
Yeah. Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah. I have a question. It's Angie Gill, if you would. So I'm clear that the journals are for the client's own private use. At any point, do you ask questions relating to issues in their communication as a joint session from the workbook?
I'm gonna show you the video, but I'll tell you what I do is I always do an individual session with each client before we go to a joint session. I'm figuring that's probably the practice for most of you. So that first individual meeting with the client, I ask in the normal, I ask many things, right? And so have you had a chance to do the first 13 pages of the workbook? Yeah. What did you learn about yourself? And they go to what resonated for them. And so that they're leading me to the parts that are that show up for them. Let me see if I can make this work. Hopefully I can. Nope. All right. That's okay. I'll find the videos another way. But what I want you to know, what happens is they have an answer when you say, what did you learn about yourself? Could you imagine? Okay, I never used to ask that question of anyone. I can't imagine what they would answer if I said, so this really sucks. Sounds like it's a really hard time for you. What are you learning about yourself? And so I never did that, but I started doing it after I noticed people showing up just more prepared for that first planning session. Like I call it the pre-mediation session. I don't know what you call it, but before the joint session, that preparation meeting now is so much more meaningful and it's so much more connected to what the client needs, not what information I need. It's so easy for them to then go to, well, I learned that my conflict style is very much to avoid. And I realize now that's probably why we are where we are, or she's always talking over me and I'm always running away, leave me alone. I think that's an introvert extrovert thing. And people will say that. Yeah. Or I realize how much I do not trust her anymore. And that trust page was really hard, but yeah. I see what you mean. Like there's parts of it I think that we can work on. And so I've had so many experiences with people who can take the experience of having reflected before they come to a meeting, but there's no rehearsal. There's no, it doesn't position them to demand anything. And that first question truly is open to their response.
Looks like there's a, thanks, Jacinta. Looks like there's a question from iPhone. I don't know who you are, but you have your hand up, I believe.
That's me. Is it okay? Can I share my thought?
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's not a very well-developed question, but I'm just kind of sitting here thinking that I am in awe that you get your clients to do 13 pages of a workbook, whereas me, I would say more than half of my clients, I struggle to get them to do something as simple as, please write down for the next meeting a few thoughts on how you want to do Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, PA days. Please write down a few thoughts about contents of the house. What are the, the items you want to, 13 pages of a workbook? Good Lord, how do you get them to do that? That's extraordinary.
Because it's not homework. It's not the same. Look, I hear you. And in fact, there are people who don't look, if they don't look closely at what's in the workbook, they walk past because they think, oh, I do that already. All I can tell you is I took what I learned from insight and curiosity to say that people do want to learn about themselves. They just don't want to do what we tell them to do. And they do not resist. I swear to God, it's 2 years now. We finally got a client who resisted. Okay, I'm being honest with you. And I'm like, yay, we'll have an answer to this question that's asked all the time. And so this client left with the workbook because we just make it, this is how we work. You get a workbook and your first individual meetings plus your first joint session for a flat fee. You each get a workbook, you each get an individual meeting with me, and we get a joint session and basic information gathering around money. And so this one client left and the staff were sitting around thinking, oh, she's going to be back for a refund. She really was resistant. And 2 days later, she wrote, oh my God, I feel so much better. Thank you so much. It's because it is not homework. What the first 13 pages are, who are you? And you're not invited to answer long questions. I could see some people, in fact, I think I might be one of them. I might not write much. I might do a lot of this internally in my mind because I like to work stuff out. I'm an extrovert. So I might not write as much. And then other clients, you've seen they've written long paragraphs in each section. I don't ask them to show me. It's just that the relationship that we build, they'll often open their workbook and I can just see how much they're writing. Then I keep a copy of the empty workbook on the desk always. So I'm going to show you, well, let me see how long this one is.
You found the video. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but if you found the video, let's play it.
So in this series of videos, I work with clients in the room. It's intended to show you my approach. We wait.
Maybe turn the sound up a titch.
Yep. They've identified any patterns that they think might be troubling. All right, that's it. I should tell you though that this is a couple named Jane and John. That doesn't matter. Here we go. All right. Hey, John.
Hello, Jacinta.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You've had the workbook in your hands for a week, and I had asked you to do the first 13. Did you get a chance to do that?
Yep, did all 13.
All right. So what did you learn about yourself?
I learned a couple different things, that I'm an extrovert, but my conflict style doesn't really represent that, because I find when it comes down to conflict, I avoid it as much as possible.
Oh, so you're talking about, I think I call this page 8. When you were looking at this page, where did you find yourself showing up on the conflict style chart?
Yeah, definitely towards avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the pattern that you have with Jane? What did you, I know you'd only be guessing, but what would you describe as her conflict style?
I would describe hers as kind of fight to be right.
Oh, yeah.
I find sometimes that'll push me away. That will make me want to avoid it because I feel like she's just wanting to be right the whole time. So I just don't want to be a part of it anymore. So I just avoid it as much as possible. Okay, how do you do that? I usually just close up the books and disappear for a bit and kind of lose contact with her. Okay. So in this process where you two are going to have to start making decisions together,
about your families, moving into 2 homes, it's important to remember that the conversations that you'll need to have, you may end up having arguments. And my job is to help you have those in a productive way so that you can have discussions rather than fights.
Right.
And one of the ways that it might help is for you to think about, if your tendency is to avoid, then staying in the room will be harder for you than someone whose tendency is to sort of keep the dialogue or the argument going.
Right.
So how could I be most helpful to you to help you stay in the room?
Lock the doors.
Well, that isn't something I normally do.
Yeah.
Can you think of other things that might be helpful?
Just keep me talking. Try to get me engaged in the conversation. I'll find I'll have a tendency to get a little bit angry kind of fast. So just try to get me keep talking, and I'll do my best on my part.
Okay. You said that you found yourself to be, when you looked at the page 9 information, that you were more of an extrovert,
Right.
that showed up. One of the things that happens when you're an extrovert is you tend to think out loud. So we tend to be talking while we're thinking. I'm an
Right.
extrovert too. And so when you think about that pattern, it might be important for you to take the time that you need to reflect before you speak, especially if you think that Jane is more of an introvert.
Right.
All right? Because Jane will be doing that. She'll be thinking before she speaks, and sometimes that can come across as being the firm and final answer.
Right.
So I'll do some work with her to help her prepare for the meetings as well. But I'd really encourage you to do a review of this pattern page, like what's your couple pattern? If the conflict styles if you tend to avoid, to think about ways that you're going to let me help you express yourself more productively.
Right.
And to remember that your natural way is to think while you speak, and I'll try and normalize that if
Right.
things get tough.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Great. So that example was it Angie? Whoever was saying, how do you get clients to do it? None of that that's exactly as I've seen it with clients. And that actually was my son. But all I told him to do, and he's a bit of a slacker, so he only did the bare minimum. I said, do the first 13 pages of the workbook, come to the recording place tomorrow. You're going to marry your sister. You're going to break up. And so there was no prep on that at all. He did go to introvert, extrovert, and conflict style. And so I've had other clients say they read further. I had a financial planner. What did you learn about yourself? Oh my God, I learned why me and Mayor always fight about money. And he had a story to tell about the way he was raised, what his sort of happy-go-lucky, there's always enough approach to the world of money it is, but how it in many ways disrespects her natural worry about money because of the way that she was grown up. So he already got insight into the fact that basically he's patting her on the head saying, don't worry, honey. And she's seething and angry. I mean, I got that in the first meeting. And so what I mean by there's a difference between getting people to do homework and asking them to discover something about themselves that's totally relevant to the moment they're in. The moment they're in, they're asking for our help to help them communicate so they can reach an agreement. So this is relevant, which is different from sometimes, I mean, I used to have questionnaires that I put out to clients too, or you'd give them homework and my God, they'd never do them. But the first 13 pages, there's a lot of space you might have noticed. There might be 6 questions on one page. And so it's not like it's a lot of reading. The other piece that you might have noticed from the video was the educational part. So it wasn't all asking, because Sam, or John was his name, I think, went to introvert, extrovert, and conflict style. I knew that's what resonated for him. So he was open to learning something about what it means to be that way. Whereas if I had started the conversation going through the whole workbook, so what about values? What about trust? They'd be like, leave me alone, it's fine. So it's really that first question to get them to point out what resonated for them. Trust will come up later, maybe it did in this case. And when it did, I said, hey, trust never really came up before now. Let's turn to page 5, okay? And on Zoom, what's nice is there's like a tactical connection. All right, everybody turn to page 5, please. Okay, what parts of All right, so Marianne, which parts of trust do you think you still have? And you'll pick boundaries, reliability, accountability, privacy, honesty, non-judgment, or generosity. And so one of my favorite cases, she said, well, I think we've got our boundaries and our privacy pretty well sorted. And he said, well, I agree, boundaries and privacy, but also reliability. And she's like, I don't think so. He wanted to take the kids to Disney World and she'd have nothing of it. And so instead of being it like, oh, what do we do now? There's a fight. And I know many of you are skilled and know how to manage a fight. But what I love is I just turn the empty page. All right, which parts do you want to work on? So they look at it and it's familiar. They've already seen this page. So it's not new. And they pick to work on non-judgment and generosity. And then of course, reliability, because one of them thought they had it and the other didn't. And because they chose those three components, I was able to say, all right, as your mediator, is it okay if I remind you that those are the three things that you're working on? Yes. And of course, you've got opportunities twice more in that meeting and in creating their agreement as they're working towards it, knowing that it will be really important for them to ensure that reliability is covered off, because that's one of the practical sides of trust that can be often in the way. Whereas other couples, they're like, we're fine. We still trust each other. We just can't live together. And so trust doesn't show up in the conversation. But boy, they cannot make decisions together. They have very different ways of making decisions and their values are different in relation to parenting. And so we go there. And so it's like we get to the pain points earlier. It saves the client's time and it helps us deliver that higher level of value that we want to. No matter what your professional background is, if you want to be facilitating dialogue and less debate, and if you want clients to be more accountable, then you might love working this way. Because the extra bonus is when the clients sign on for the resource package, I know that I've got them to the end of that first joint session. And that time that we spend together individually and together is going to be more productive because of the ways that I'll understand how to help them, even if they haven't yet learned so much themselves. I know, oh yeah, as soon as he starts talking too much while he's thinking, she's going to start shutting down. So I'm going to be watching for that. Someone else, it might be as soon as the trust question comes up, we just have to let it be for this first meeting and know that we might not be building it till the next one. And so we understand pain points a lot earlier and a lot better. So the educational piece that we want to play, when it's relevant to what they've discovered, they get it. When it's not relevant to what they've discovered, it's like, whatever. Not always. I mean, some of us are great educators, but clients aren't ready to be told anything at some stages when they're resisting us. There was a question in the chat about other cultures.
Right.
And new Canadians. And so what we've got right now is our first version. So we've got Malaysia right now, and it's interesting. The Malaysian lawyers, they're two of the collaborative lawyers in Malaysia. They've done the workbooks. They've done them with their staff just to check on language. And really, there were really no changes to be made. Language-wise, we've got Spanish. We don't have French yet, so we're going to have to figure that out in Canada. Spanish, German, the Brazilians are working on a Portuguese version. And so far, everyone's saying, because it's just articulated in a friendly conversational tone, that it does make sense. It doesn't require that a culture become really direct. It just asks about you and your pattern. So that I think, though I live in Prince Edward Island and I haven't had a mediation with what would we even call, like with new Canadians yet. The point is that there's nothing in it that demands the clients do anything except discover some things about themselves and their pattern. And then where it provides information on the parenting side, it's in the form of questions. So Carrie, hi.
Hi, I have a question. Sometimes in mediation, when I meet with them, we talk about, as you go through in the booklet, there's some trigger points for couples. Do you ever provide them with an opportunity for an out during a meeting where they get very emotional, or they just say, can we continue this on another day?
Oh, yeah. Oh, what I find, Carrie, is that the way I mediate isn't isn't really different in the ways that you'd make a decision to, have a caucus or to take a break or to schedule a meeting, in the morning for someone who's not, who sleeps in the afternoon. But when it comes to the conflict points, what I find is we're better able to manage them because there's more insight. The clients have a little bit more insight into what their obstacles are. And so if we're dealing with highly troubled people, I would be building a team anyway, right? So I wouldn't want to be the only professional working with a couple where there's clearly some mental illness or addiction or trauma stuff that is going to trigger and potentially hurt people. So what I find is that there's just more knowledge among the team members of what's going on for this couple that's discovered through the client's own discovery rather than so much of us drawing it out or telling.
I think the booklet would be very beneficial for mediators to give us additional questions to ask in those initial meetings with our clients. We ask them lots of questions and we sort of know where they're both coming from, but I think that would provide a great resource for us for other things that we may perhaps haven't thought about asking that would really be beneficial once we go into mediation.
Yeah, Carrie, and then Marie-France has lifted her hand. But I also want to say this, as someone, so I do training as well. So I'm often like teaching stuff. And I honestly, now I just want to say, just get the workbook, because if you practice mediation by asking these kinds of questions, you might not have to spend the 2 years getting kicked in the ass to learn insight the way I did. But I do think that you're right, Carrie. There's a way of, like, we have to have a rapport with our clients. And I think many of us spend a lot more time establishing rapport because we know how valuable it is.
Yeah.
And I find that when the client knows what they're getting, do the first 13 pages, I'll see you on Thursday. I was going to say they're almost delighted to share, if I could be so bold. And if they're really, really troubled and they're really struggling, we're going to know that because they're not going to be able to have done it. So it's another way to know. Okay.
I'm just jumping in with Marie-France's next, as you saw. Just a quick question. How do they obtain the workbook? And then we'll go to Marie-France's question because I know people have to leave right at 2.
Oh, do you mean how does the client?
How do we, is there an online version? How do we,
Oh yeah, no. What we've been doing since COVID is we're sending them in the mail because the paper copy is the one that on Zoom is really, really, really lovely because you can turn to it. And there's an electronic version that's going to be created as an experience, but not a fillable PDF. I have one client who's blind. Well, he can see, he's what they call it legally blind. So we've given him a PDF only because he's going to need to see it on his screen. Otherwise, paper is 2 years in, we've just got paper. Marie-France.
I don't know if you remember me. I was a lawyer in PEI for 10 years. I left and came back to Ottawa in 2010. And I worked with Brenda, who I'm presuming is Cheryl's
there you are.
sister.
Yeah, hi. I'm trying to find you. Yeah, that's Cheryl's sister.
And Judith was my paralegal for a while. So that family is my favorite family ever, I think.
There you go.
I want to say a couple of things. First of all, the genius here, I think, really is the fact that, especially in those first 13 pages, is you're putting people in a situation where if they're normally really combative when they're thinking about or talking about their ex, you're turning things on to them and in a context where they don't need to impress anyone. They don't need to convince you. They don't need to do, it's really by telling them this is just for you, they're writing for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part that is often missing in our mediations is turning our clients' view onto themselves and saying, okay, so show me who you are and what you want to get out of this, as opposed to, well, the other party is this, the other party is that, the other party is this, the other party is that. So I love that. I love the idea of kind of that, and that's that's insight, right? But it's kind of like that self-insight that we're able to create for them. So
And we're not demanding, and Marie-France, we're not demanding it of them. Sometimes you'll have that conversation in the moment and they don't know how to respond because they get defensive.
Absolutely, right?
agree.
They've got time to think about it. They've got time to just kind of, and they do it for themselves. So I love that. So I'm like super, super excited about all of this, but especially that part. And I just wanted to kind of throw out there, if you need any help at all with the French version of this, I volunteer. I'll connect with you, you connect with me, whatever.
Yeah.
And if anyone else wants to help along as well too, but definitely I would love to be a part of that.
Yay, okay, because we do have a couple of other Francophone Canadians who want to. So lovely to see you
Excellent.
again. Yeah,
Put me on the team.
Right.
everyone's moving around the screen.
Yeah, it's because people have to leave. So I
I did it by mistake. Let me just say this, because I think we do have to go.